to do it. Furthermore, even the AMLE agrees that differentiation is very difficult for teachers to implement. It requires huge amounts of professional development and ongoing support. So we're asking our teachers, who are already saying they're overworked and underpaid, to work even harder to meet every student's needs in these new mixed ability classrooms. It seems odd to me that the union is even proposing this. People assume that those high-achieving and high-cap kids are easy to teach, but it isn't true. They're just as difficult and time-consuming as for struggling students. They just need very different things. I gave a talk for the Leota Honor Society a few days ago, and I was surprised that when I asked about struggling with perfectionism, nearly every single student raised their hand. Perfectionism keeps high-ability kids from stretching outside their comfort zones on their own. We heard a student speak to this just a few minutes ago. They need a lot of teacher support, and that takes time. If we don't have, the only way that I can see mixed ability classrooms to make a teacher's work easier is if they don't actually differentiate for the full range of students in their classrooms. Which students are going to miss out? I don't know, but I don't want to find out.
Good afternoon. My name is Mindy Worth, and my printer took the worst possible moment today, so I'm going to read off my phone here. I have two kids in North Shore schools, and I have one that will be starting in 2017, so I'll be here for a long, long time. But first, I'd like to thank the board for your hard work and dedication to the students of North Shore. I'd also like to congratulate Superintendent Francois on your new role, and I wish you the best of luck. I'm here not to talk about challenge, but I am speaking today in support of a national search for our new superintendent. North Shore School District is standing on the edge of a number of major changes that will have an impact on almost every family in our community. Everything from the new high school, boundary changes, grade reconfiguration, and a new high school start times. We need to consider now that our best chance to navigate these new waters is with strong leadership. Now is not the time to settle for an interim replacement or just tread water. As one of the larger districts in Washington State, actions by North Shore do not go unnoticed, and North Shore has enjoyed a reputation as being a good district. In real estate, as often seen by new construction signs, North Shore is considered a selling point, which is great. There's an obvious reason why families ultimately end up living in this community, and I suspect that the district often plays some role in that decision. I'd like you, though, to consider these facts from the National Center for Education Statistics. Washington State is 36th in the nation in high school completion, tied for 48th in high school graduates that meet the entrance requirements for four-year colleges, 46th in the nation in students who enter college, 50th in the nation in third-year college students, 38th in college graduation rates. Approximately 16% of ninth graders will graduate from college in 10 years. These statistics are a few years old now. However, with the gaps we continue to see in basic education funding, the only relatively recent coordination of K-12 in the college system for graduation requirements, and the relatively slim selection of four-year schools to choose from, with 4 of the 5 public universities located outside of major population centers, and no top-tier private universities, being a good district in a state that has little to boast about doesn't add up to much. Our children are literally growing up in the backyard of high tech, with Microsoft, Amazon, Google, to name a few, located nearby. As an employee in high tech, I often joke that I am a minority, and I know it's not a joke. It's not because I am a woman, but because I am a local. To that end, Washington State is the #2 importer of talent. To adequately prepare all students for career in college upon graduation, earn the reputation as a great district, not just in Washington, but as an example of a district that rises to the challenge, and we have a lot, and truly produce excellence, I urge you to pursue a nationwide search for our next superintendent. And on a personal note, I am a graduate of North Shore Schools. I'm a lifelong resident. My parents still live in the same house I grew up in. I can't move to Bellevue. I could, but I'm not going to move to Bellevue because this is where I live, and this is where I'm very proud to say is my home. Thank you.
Amen, York?
I'm Eamon Yor, 7th grader at Timbercrest, currently taking 3 out of the 4 challenge courses provided to me. And I feel that in those challenge courses I am performing well because of how much it's pushing me to perform. And I like that I was given the choice to take the courses because I would not have paid as much attention if I had been repeating something in the lower class. Or And I have 3 siblings that would come after me into this, and I wish that they would have the choice to take whatever they feel would help them grow in their academics. And I like that the choices is provided to you. If you don't feel like you're comfortable in challenge, you don't have to take it. But if you feel that you could perform well in challenge, that you were given the option to do it. Thank you.
Questions for you. Thank you. In your class, or in your 3 challenge classes and in your one that's not challenged, do you see different students throughout the day? Are your classes mixed up, or are you kind of with the same students all the way through school?
My classes are usually kind of mixed because they're challenge. In challenge, I usually see like 2 to 3 of the same faces, and in the one non-challenge, I see a bunch of new faces that I don't see throughout the day.
And what is that one class that you don't take?
Social studies.
And is that just not your best subject?
Yeah, I'm not very interested.
Great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Liam Kozel, and I'm speaking for the Challenge program. I participate in all Challenge, and I'm highly capable in 2 classes, and I think it provides a great environment as well as good material. I have a lot of friends in those classes who see the same things that I do and who think the same way that I do. Although I do have a lot of friends in non-challenge classes, and I don't know. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Catherine Tucson. You guys have gotten an email about this already, but seeing as the board meeting was today, I thought I'd take this opportunity. I have 2 children in North Shore schools, one of whom you can hear at the back table. I'm sorry about that. Pardon me. I'm a member of the unofficial community Facebook group called the NSD Discussion Group, which is a great resource for discussing general goings-on and concerns with other North Shore families and students. And I was shocked and horrified to discover yesterday morning that at least one district employee was participating in the group under, apparently, a spouse's account. So they could participate in this community group without their name being on things, and use that access to the group to take screenshots of community discussions and concerns and share them with North Shore School District administrators. I know that several district employees participate in the group, and I had always assumed that any district participation would be open, honest, and transparent. Joining the group under a false identity and sharing people's conversations without anyone's awareness or consent is an appalling breach of trust. Apart from anything else, by sending these screenshots through district email addresses, this person has moved all those conversations into the permanent public record and rendered them subject to public disclosure laws. Everyone knows that nothing you say on the internet is ever really private, but there's a really big difference between not really private and discoverable by anyone who fills out a records request, particularly when it comes to conversations about our children. I'm willing to believe that this was a thoughtless blunder rather than a willful disregard for students' and parents' privacy, but the fact that this employee did this under a fake name, essentially, means that they knew that what they were doing was wrong. I don't know yet if any legal lines were crossed by district employees, but I'm pretty angry, and I have questions. Who is this employee who's been monitoring these groups? Who asked them to do it? How long has this been going on, and in how many groups? Why would the district monitor parents in secret? How much district employee time has been spent monitoring parents and community members? What did you do with this information once you got it? And lastly, is this behavior something that you would be proud to have stand as a model for respectful and responsible social media use for other North Shore students? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Corney, and I am a 6th grader at Eastridge Elementary, and I am here to talk about the challenge programs. And ever since maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, I've been looking forward to going to Timbercrest, because currently I'm a 6th grader at Eastridge, and I do not enjoy being in 6th grade at an elementary school still. So I've also been looking forward to going to Timbercrest because of the challenge programs, and I feel in my class right now that sometimes we will spend like 2 days or so on a subject like multiplying and dividing decimals, which really could be consumed in 1 day or like 2 days at the most, but sometimes it takes 3 days, because when we're multiplying or dividing, we might do something like, do you understand when you have a decimal 3.2 and you move the decimal 1 space over, and we're explaining all that, and a majority of the class raises their hand and asks why. And right now I am taking homework above what my class is giving out, so about 5 students in my class are in a challenge program, but it's really not, because we learned at the same pace of our class, and we're really basically learning the same stuff, we're just having harder homework. So I really don't want you guys to take away the challenge programs, because then I won't have as much of an opportunity to get into really good schools, or it won't prepare me as much as I would like it to. And I want a faster paced class for math and reading and some of the other subjects I'm interested in.
Question for you. So when you're given the extra homework, is there somebody teaching that to you, or you're teaching it to yourself? How does that work? Are you getting different concepts, or is it the same concept?
So it's the same concept, but it's harder homework. So some people may be getting like division problems with whole numbers, and we're getting division problems with decimals, but we're still learning the same things at the same pace as the rest of our class.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That concludes our public comment section of the agenda. So now, Director D'Angelo has a good point. Please don't feel obligated to stay for the rest of the meeting. We'd love you to. We enjoy a full room, but please don't think there's any obligation to. So thank you very much for coming out. So next on the agenda is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussions or questions?
I have a tiny little edit on the minutes from the 29th special meeting. It said that under attendance, Ken Smith joined the meeting via conference call. I had been on the conference call, but I was not able to really hear it. So I joined it in person at 8:14. So it's just tiny. We need to take it off the consent agenda, but just I joined it in person on February 29th.
I have an edit to the agenda, to the minutes. And I apologize that I did not bring this up earlier, it was not intentional. But I noticed it in this whole Facebook discussion that under new business, I had brought up that I wanted to have in our board briefing the procedures for employees for Facebook. And we did receive those, but that wasn't listed under new business. So I don't know if we can amend that.
In the minutes.
In the minutes, yes. Yeah, correct. And I think it's important to put that on the record. We did receive it though, so thank you.
At the February 23rd meeting?
It was the last meeting, because it was in the board briefing following that.
So we'll amend those, the minutes of 2:23 and 2:29 and bring those back to the next board meeting. So I would entertain a friendly correction that you're approving the consent agenda absent those 2 sets of minutes, and we'll bring those back next time for with those corrections.
Okay. I No more further discussion, I'll call for a vote.
And this is the vote on the amended.
On the amended,
Thank you.
yeah, the corrected minutes will come back next board meeting
Thank you.
for review, absolutely. All right, with the noted changes, the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next on the agenda, under action items, is the second reading of board policy number 4315, regulation of dangerous weapons on school premises. Being that this is the second reading, it's tradition that we ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on this policy? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Okay, and the policy passes unanimously. Next on the agenda, second reading of board policy numbers 8111, emergency routes and schedules, 8131, private vehicle transportation of students, and 8140, school-owned vehicles. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second? Thank you. Any discussion, questions? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Those policies also passed unanimously. So next on the agenda, we move over to board reports and communications. Yes, and under board reports and communications is new business. So no worries. So you'll notice here, we have a few things, and before we go to proposed topics, I just want to review them because one of them I did want to get some input on. So first of all, as requested, is the initiatives and new business requests. So the tally, if this is not something we vote on like in the consent agenda as part of the minutes, so if there's any edits or clarifications anyone would like to request, I'm always very, very open. I just want to state that since it's the first time we have it out there. The second item is the end of year activities matrix. So, and I'm getting mine out of I printed it out myself here. So the activities matrix pops up this time of year because for the school board there's quite a few events that we are asked to participate in. So this is something, first of all, for folks' benefit on the board, and also so we can start to talk about participation by the board. The asterisk items are activities that board members are asked to give a speech, and there's quite a few. You'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I lost my count, 6, 7, 8. So I don't know when we have to have that down. If folks are ready to sign up for them now, I'm happy to take some ideas of who might be willing to go when, or we can, I'm sure we'll have time to discuss it at the next board meeting as well.
Amy, I had a clarifying question. I don't believe last year at the ATP events, they had a board member speak. Okay, and I noticed they've got some asterisks by them this year, so I'm assuming that.
Yeah, so the 3 comprehensives and the 2 alternative high schools would do those. That's probably the most time-sensitive one, is for the schools as they're putting their programs together for graduation to know both who will be in attendance as well as who will be intending to speak. Kind of important those commitments can be honored because once thousands of programs are printed, it's hard to make that change.
Absolutely. So when board members were reviewing the agenda, did they have an opportunity to think about this? Are there any that folks would like to volunteer for? Or at least say that you know for sure you'll be in attendance?
I would like to comment that I will be attending the North Shore Schools Foundation luncheon. That was one of the entries. I'd also like to request to give the commencement speech, or at least comment, at the Bothell High School graduation.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you. And I also plan on attending the Woodinville and Inglemoor graduation as well. And I also was willing to go to the ATP Pathways.
June 16th. great. Any other board members have any thoughts?
At the luncheon.
Yeah, how about that? That's a pretty close one. So do folks have a pretty good feel for attendance at the luncheon?
I probably mentioned another 2 weeks.
I will be at the luncheon as well.
I will be at the luncheon.
Sandy, are you able to go to the luncheon?
I've already RSVP'd for the luncheon. Do you want me to do the rest of it?
Thank you.
Looking at the May 24th, I know we've got the equity conference. If no one else is going to be there, I will go late to the equity conference to make sure that we do have a board member.
Yeah, so I just picked up an email late this afternoon from the Scholarship Foundation, and they're contemplating moving that to May 19th. So I think we'll probably have to talk about that at a later date once they confirm where they're going to land on that.
Okay, so we'll table that for a little bit until we confirm the date. Great.
Did you want to do the rest, or did you finish up?
Well, no, good.
Okay.
Dive in.
All right. I will be at the PTSA brunch on June 2nd, the staff retirement on June 2nd. All 5 of the graduation ceremonies, and the ATP pathways on the 16th. And I'm happy to speak wherever, but I know we've got others that speak a lot.
You're not going to hog it, are you? Okay, so I'll jump in. So so we've covered, I'll just cross off the foundation luncheon, so we've all covered that one. I'll be able to go to the June 2nd PTSA brunch, staff retirement. I don't have any conflicts for the rest, so I will go to them all, and I'm happy to speak where needed, except for Bob. So in Kimberly, because our schedule with the school is a little tricky, she's not.
My son's graduating also.
Well, there you go.
From a
Yeah, we've
different
got a
school.
wedding to plan too, so. But Ken, do you have any inclinations at this point? What your schedule
I will be available to speak and attend all.
All right.
Graduates one of those weekends with June.
So just as soon as you know. So, board members, so of the folks able to go to the graduation, do we want to help the programs? Does anyone have a, I've spoken at Woodinville for the last couple years. I'm happy to do it again, of course. I'm also happy to, I know it's kind of a tradition for folks to rotate too, so I don't want to hog it. Have anything they're really burning to? No, see? Okay, so I will be happy to talk at, since I can go to the ATP networks and pathways, I'll go ahead and speak at those.
Actually, they don't have board members. That's what I just
Oh,
clarified.
the 8th, okay, forget it.
Yeah, they don't.
Thank you, I'll cross off my first one. So, but pathways, I can definitely speak at pathways.
I'm sorry, neither of the ATP.
Neither of the ATP?
No, it's very kid-focused, and
All right, that's
they-
great.
they're
We
not
don't need a
inter-
long drawn out
yeah, they don't,
ceremony,
they're not
do we?
interested in us at all.
Okay.
Not that there aren't any of the others, but.
How about I'll volunteer for staff retirement? I'm happy to do that.
I'll,
that one last year.
yeah, you did.
That's a fun one.
I'll take on Woodinville then.
All right. I'll do Inglemoor. Do Inglemoor, all right. And would you like to speak at SAS or
I
North Shore
would.
Networks?
I would like that.
Either, both? What would you like?
I could do both.
They're on the same day, which is
Yeah.
nice and convenient, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so I think, and then if you, once you look at your schedule, if you'd like the opportunity, just let us know. Okay. All right, great, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone. So,
now, let me just do one more bookkeeping if we can before we get into new business topics. The other one is the proposed retreat agenda. That's on the, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. That is next on the agenda. Pardon me, my notes are not as organized as they should be. Let's stick with new business. Would anyone like to add any new business topics?
I have a new topic I'd like to add. And because there was an email that came across that there was a candidate interested in the superintendent position from within the district, I would like to move that we have a study session to discuss that candidate's interest, candidate or candidates.
Can we do that at the same time we're looking at those proposals? Or we have that on there?
Well,
Is that what
yes,
we're thinking?
or were you thinking of an additional meeting?
I had that as an alternative too, just depends on the timing. If people would like to do that sooner or wait. For me, it seemed like if we have time scheduled, we can do it. Just have that conversation sooner.
I'd probably rather wait to get the proposals, we have those, and then have all the information at once. Otherwise, I feel it's speculative.
I mean, with the proposals, we'll just have bids for proposals to review, so.
So, I'm making notes, so just to ensure, I'm understanding correctly, David, so just make sure that when we plan the meeting to review proposals, that we also stipulate talking about internal candidates? Am I capturing that correctly?
Much. If we do include it in the board retreat on 3/22, I think any interested party that submits a resume by 4:30 on 3/21 should be part of that discussion. So I know that we're going to have search firms that are going to be submitting proposals, but if any individuals are interested, then we should have that information as well.
So I guess my question is, I'm a little confused. Are we opening this up for anyone in the district as an internal candidate to apply then? Because at first I heard you say you heard that there was one, so are we opening this up? That's my question.
So there's a document that has the NSD superintendent job descriptions. And so it seems to me if anybody has that qualification, is interested, that they should send a resume and we should consider that along with proposals.
To take a vote, I mean, is that
Well,
an action item?
I think, yeah, so what I'm thinking of is that it is, allowing internal candidates to apply before March 22nd. I think it's something to discuss for sure initially, and then if it's something that we want to get more information on, typically, discuss kind of the steps. If it's anything board members would like to get information on. At first, we haven't gone down the road yet of talking about qualifications, interim versus permanent. We haven't really defined some of those previous steps. So I just want to open up the idea of how to talk about, maybe this is it. Do we want to do further research on incorporating a process for North Shore School District employees to apply before the end of the month in the same timeline as the proposals? Do we want to do some research on that and talk about it at a later time? I'm throwing it out for discussion.
So we have our board protocols that I was hoping were going to be up here. Yeah, there it is, I think, yes. And our decision-making matrix. So the hiring of a superintendent, which would include an interim, is a level 4. And that requires that we go through at least this process before we're deciding that we're now opening this up for internal candidates, which I'm not saying I'm opposed to that. What I'm saying is that we had a meeting, a special meeting, we asked for research proposals, and now that's the process that I had assumed we were in, and when we got those research proposals on March 22nd, my understanding was then we would have the discussion about, whether it was an internal, whether it's an external, but and the research proposals were also based on looking for an intern candidate also. That was going to be included in the research proposals. I think Ken had asked for both a permanent superintendent search proposal and also an intern superintendent search proposal. So I feel like we're jumping way ahead and we're maybe not sticking with what our board protocols are in our matrix if we do this before March 22nd, as we had all agreed to.
I don't mean to think that we're jumping ahead, but I think that we didn't identify a process for anybody that is other than identified through the search committees. And I think that was the miss that I was trying to address, was if we have other folks that are qualified and interested, let's make that mechanism available to those folks versus saying, okay, search firms, there's people that we are aware of, here's their names. I just think it just is smart to get that input as well.
This whole process is new to me. Did the search firms not do an internal look? Are they only going to be looking externally?
Or do we define that once
Right.
we?
Right, well, I guess
decide
that's my
to move
question. Is
forward?
the
Yes.
assumption that it's only external, or can we direct the search firms to also look internally?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about that, it helps me remind me, so yes, I had mentioned, at least when we were in the discussion phase, it might not have been the final, to have external search, or no, yes, a search for a permanent, and then interim, there's two types of interims oftentimes that you get, the internal interim, and then, kind of like a retire or something like that. So for my mind, it was like those three, but they would, I guess when I was thinking about it, was that all of those would go through the process, and then the search firm would help us, and we could choose to go, because we should be able to get, I'm expecting to get proposals for, quote unquote, just an interim search, or just permanent, or either, or both. How would they apply that? I do want to just ask one clarification. If Director Kogan had made a motion or started to bring up an idea, because I thought I heard you say make a motion.
Yeah, I was making a motion because I thought we could decide if that was what everyone felt on that, and then, have that discussion, but I know that it wasn't on the agenda, so.
Sure, but if a motion is being made, then, and I don't know if in our protocol and our new business, and if Director Kogan wants to make a motion, then I think the discussion should take place after the motion has been made and seconded, because we started discussing it. And I wasn't quite sure if I heard him say, I want to make a motion, or I would like to consider, so.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
so a motion has been made.
Motion has been, would anyone like to second the motion?
I will second the motion.
Okay. No, thank you for the clarification.
Just right, and
Yeah.
sometimes I know even in my own mind, when I want to bring something in this part, and it's new to us to go through this part, do we want to start it with a motion, which I think is fine, or start just discussing?
Okay, and then Larry, you were going to say something about.
I was just going to say that it would, in my estimation, what you're likely to receive in your RFPs with respect to an interim is their process and their price essentially for searching for an outside interim. It would be more typical that if a district went with an internal interim, you likely wouldn't contract with a search firm for that because you have a certain level of comfort and a certain level of familiarity with that intern person. Now it's possible you may ask them to do some background checking or reference checking or some of that kind of work on behalf of the board. But again, if it's an internal person, particularly if they've been in the district for a long period of time, it's generally presumed you sort of know that information and wouldn't necessarily contract with a consultant for that. But
How do we level the playing field? I mean, I don't even know who might be interested or who's qualified or how that works.
I guess I'm somewhat uncomfortable having this discussion without having announced it in a public meeting on it. So I'm not uncomfortable having the discussion of should we get this on our agenda for the next time or call a special meeting. But I guess I appreciate your comments. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if we're going to start talking about our internal candidates, then
I don't even know how that works.
Yeah.
So that's why
So
I'm trying to get a picture of it in my head.
So it seems to me maybe there's sort of three levels of decision-making, as I'm seeing them. One is on the March 22nd, presumably you're going to have a series of proposals to look at that are going to specify a comprehensive search for a permanent superintendent and what a search for an interim superintendent would look like. So I think the first level of decision-making is which direction do we want to go, given timeline and what the applicant pool may look like as we get closer, farther along in the spring. And then maybe the second level of decision is, depending on, if you say you went to an interim, then that second level of decision making is, do we want to consider internal interims, or do we want to ask a search firm to go in and see if they can identify a potential external?
That helps, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask for
That was good
clarification? I'm sorry, I was going to ask for clarification of the motion, because it was a while ago.
So the motion was schedule a study session to discuss interested internal superintendent candidates. And that was my first motion. And the thought was, along the lines with what Larry said, is if we make decisions or at least have a conversation, then we can be more thoughtful about the process. I just thought it was a topic that we should be discussing.
Can I,
So I originally heard you say that it was one internal candidate, so that's where I guess I'm getting confused.
So I guess my point is to be general and just say any internal candidates, what is the mechanism? Right now, I wasn't really clear on the mechanism. Like Sandy said, we haven't been through this process, so I'm not really sure of the process, but I'm trying to think of if we have, I think that's a valuable discussion to have before we consider, spending money with a search firm. If we have other alternatives that we prefer, that's all. So just have that conversation.
I have it on good authority that Vicki Sherwood and Anything More High School would love to be the next.
Oh, I'm in it next term.
well, so
She joked about that last night.
in terms of
I also
process.
offered it to Todd Banks and he turned us down.
You turned us down? Thank you for
You don't want
trying
to do
that.
it to you.
In terms of process, if on May 22nd, we're evaluating, not only search firms, but interim versus permanent, would it make sense to have done at least some process thinking before then about internal versus external, so that if we've already said on May 22nd, we're going to pick which direction to go, does it make sense to have a conversation before then what internal would look like if we chose on the 22nd? Is that similar to what you were thinking, David?
My recommendation was that we have the conversation. Wherever and whenever people are comfortable, it just seems like that should be discussed because we've got a major task ahead of us to make good decision making, so we should be talking about it.
And I agree, and I think that I'm comfortable with it being that meeting. I'd like to have all the information there, and you can even provide us documents or information on internal. I mean, if you find those, I could do my own research, but I'd like to have everything that we're looking at, even if the research proposals, requests for proposals don't have tons of extra information. I just want to have everything
So
for us.
So if I'm understanding correctly then, as a part of the March 22nd agenda, which is, we'll talk about in a minute, there would be, around the superintendent search, there would be a couple components of that. One would be reviewing the RFPs, and then a second component would be carving out some potential space within that meeting for an executive session to evaluate any internal candidates who have stepped forward and expressed interest in the position.
No.
Well, and that, maybe David can clarify, is it a process question or a review or?
Okay. So,
To me, the process is to clarify that there is a process and a mechanism, and I think that if we do want to review information on the 22nd, we are on short timeline. We almost committed in the RFP that we would make a decision by the next day. So, I mean, we've had these, these are big decisions, so it just seems like that was my first request, is that can we have this conversation prior to that, just to kind of get our thoughts together and even have more time to discuss this general process. But if everybody's comfortable waiting till the 22nd with all the information, I'm fine with that. And that's why when I put in this thing that interested parties that meet the NSD superintendent job description submit a resume to President Cass by 4:30 on 3/21. That way we've got a formal process to have that information handy when we're ready to have that meeting on the 22nd. And that's the deadline of the RFP as well.
I'm definitely not comfortable making that decision tonight because we haven't had a public meeting, we didn't let the public know about it, we haven't had. So I appreciate what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that you want to know that there's a mechanism to be able to look at internal candidates, and that we may have qualified internal not just qualified, that didn't sound right, but there's potential candidates within our own internal system here that you're asking to be a part of what we look at.
Yes.
And so on March 22nd, at that time, we could look at all of our proposals and then go, do we want external? I mean, do we want to look for a permanent superintendent based on the timeline they give us? Or are we not comfortable with that timeline and we want to do an interim search? And then that question would be, do we want it to be external, internal, or do we want it a mix of both? External candidates, internal candidates, and a mix of both. And then what would the process look like if we had internal candidates versus external, or are those somewhat the same thing for the interim?
The only thing I go back to is if we wait till that moment in time to make a decision, then we're committed to writing the check for the search. You know, that could result in candidates that we could have identified without spending that money and going through that process. So I'm fine going through the process if we feel there's value in having that kind of, you know, natural approach to all comers. I think that's fine, but that was just my question is, and then again, the timing. You know, if we have to make that decision, we're giving ourselves one day. That's not a lot of time for thought.
Well, then we'd have to go through a process of that day, we don't have to decide to use any of those companies. We could just say, we want to do an internal search and we're just going to conduct it on our own. We can decide it then, and then go through the process, however that is, that we decide upon, go through the process of doing an internal search. Or an intern. Or we could do external and internal, but you don't have to put dollars out. We don't decide to put dollars out. And we don't have to have a decision for an intern the day of March 22nd. But I think we're trying to get a decision which way are we going to go on March 22nd.
Exactly. And so if I'm hearing correctly, the question is whether or not, I hear two things, a timing question, you know, in a relationship to Kimberly's note about deciding this today. I mean, technically speaking, we have in the process we defined, if we've decided it's an emergency, we can't take a vote right now on whether or not to go forward. Or we will take a vote on the motion for sure, but we've identified in our process as that straight down path on the flow chart. If it's deemed an emergency, we could take action, and there's been enough concern on the board about the timeline. I can see why David brought that motion forward. But there's also the question of, do we have to make that decision now, or do we have another meeting before the retreat to talk more about the process? So that on March 22nd, I also hear perhaps an interest in David's mind about knowing if there are internal candidates, because that could inform what direction we go on this 22nd. Theoretically, if there aren't any internal candidates, that would make a difference to our decision, even if it's an informal, if it's not a formal application, but an informal, or somewhere in between. So I'm not clarifying the motion, which I understand. So, you know, definitely let's do some discussion. Additionally, if board members have other thoughts, we can also move on the motion that David made, or someone can make a complementary motion.
I thought the motion was just to discuss this.
Yeah, I'm still not clear.
No, the motion was whether or not, the motion I wrote it down is whether or not to allow interested internal interim candidates to apply before March 22nd.
I am not comfortable with this without us announcing this to the public. That's where I tried to separate it. We could decide to have a special meeting. This is not following, as I read it, I'm not sure what the emergency here is. The same thing that we knew a week ago when we called a special meeting, so I'm a little confused. But we have of what the emergency would be, but we have our decision-making matrix that says a level 4 is a superintendent, you know, making decision on superintendents, and we have a process that we go by here. So I really respect you bringing up that let's talk about internal candidates, but I don't understand what's happened in between our special meeting to why suddenly we're changing, we're trying to make a different decision today, and why we're not just waiting till March 22nd, because it was the same emergency. I see it as the same emergency that occurred a week ago, which we said wasn't going to be an emergency. We weren't going to get in this chaos decision-making go, and we haven't announced it, and it doesn't follow our process or our board protocols. So I guess
If
I'm lost a little bit.
Yeah, so if I hear what Director Kogan has said, and he mentioned this last time, so the notion of if you're going to consider an internal candidate, don't spend the money on a search firm and trying to find, if I'm hearing you right, a pathway to consider internal candidates. He's heard of one. I heard of, through my discussions with the community in the past week, 6 people who, through various conversations, people said, hey, I think so-and-so would be a great superintendent. And so that's, it's great, you know, and those may or may not, people be willing to accept that nomination, they may or may not be appropriately, you know, scoped for what the position is, but that's a valid question. And so if one way to do that is through the search firm, and if we want to do a vetting of everyone through a process, then that would take longer. If it wants to be, as a board can, immediately appoint a superintendent, which could be anyone, internal or external candidate, then we could also, as the board, take that course of action. So I think my understanding of the sense of the motion is to consider at least one internal candidate's name who's known before going through the search process.
I was more concerned that there was a mechanism that we agreed upon to have interested parties have a pathway to be considered and how that fits together. I think we didn't touch on that when we last met. So for me, that was something that was an omission.
And it's my understanding is the path we've talked about with considering a search firm, and then we would be seeing their proposal and then go through that process, that search firm, and having through tons of searches in universities, the search firm usually goes through that process, looks internally and externally, and then if and when they have an internal candidate like you dealt with President Cossey, you know, then that person would be put into that candidate pool. Typically you have 3. They would do what some people call the dog and pony show. I think it'll be much more substantive and valuable in our full day interviews with the community and going through that process. So I think that's the process, and if someone asks that question, that's what I believe we had already decided.
Yes.
And that was my understanding, that internal candidates would be encouraged to apply, and that through the process we would get their information and be able to find out, then they'd be a finalist, and then it would be announced as one of the 3. And so I'm trying to, does that answer your question, or are you proposing a different process?
It answers my question, and it clarifies, you know, up to a point that wasn't discussed. So I wasn't aware what the process was through the search term for internal candidates. And
That's my expectation, and again, that's a contract we would have with them, we would negotiate with them. So having been through those, that's what I'm expecting, and that's what I would hope. And it's good that you asked the question so we can clarify. I would demand, in some sense, you know, here's the names, the 6 names I've seen already. I want you to go talk to them, and these people who do that, they're used to, you know, doing the kind of outreach, finding out if someone's interested. Sometimes they're interested, of course not. And then having that longer conversation to really make sure, have you thought about this? There's 10 people that are really doing this. It's inside and outside. It's really been, so sometimes candidates are initially reluctant, you bring them in, other times, oh, I'm ready for this, and then you talk them through the process and what it looks like and say, I'm interested in this. So, but I'm just trying to make sure I'm capturing the concern that you have by saying the process we have set out, I think, encourages and properly vets in accordance with level 4 and the other processes we have, internal and external candidates.
So I'd like to say, you know, this is not meant to close off discussion of the motion at all, but an option we could have is to ask Jeff or other resources about what options might be if on May 22nd we decided we wanted to do an interim search internally. If just so we have an idea of what the process would be involved, so the board members would have it, so we would have information prepared
The thing I'd like to point out is when we get the RFPs, those are going to be made available as soon as they come in. So we have the time to take a look and review, and I would just make the same request. If there's internal candidates that want to submit a resume for the position, if they submit, then we'll have access to that information so that we have some time with material so that when we come to the 22nd, we'll have time to look at that.
This is where I'm having the disconnect, is that I'm hearing what what Ken said is what I think we all agreed to as our process. But then I'm hearing you not ask for, but say if people want to, but that's just from different searches I've been through in my work, and I think what Ken's been through, and we haven't set out that process. We haven't given the mechanism for, hey, here's a job description, here it's posted, we're ready to start taking applications. So, and I think until we do that, then we're not giving equal access to, like Ken said, he's heard 6 people and you've heard 1, and I've heard a lot of different things swirling around. So I'm not comfortable yet because we haven't asked for resumes, and we didn't decide that as a board to do that. So, but I think we could do that March 22nd. When we look at the proposals, we can make that decision then, or we could have a special meeting to do this if that's what everybody agreed to.
Was the initial request was, do we want to, as a board, decide to have a special meeting to discuss this, sooner than the 22nd or on the 22nd? And then just a clarifying question of how candidates that are aware of the job can proactively engage. So if it's wait till, get a list of names and then give it to the search firm, we can do that on the 22nd.
So I think that's where we're deciding what process we're going to use this on the 22nd.
So if I can, I think I heard the motion is to do a special meeting before the 22nd. If that's
Well, maybe because we do
to
have
talk
a
about
motion on the.
process for internal candidates.
Right, so we do, so that kind of has 2 motions. So maybe we should, if we want to close up one before we move to another, would that make some sense? Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote on, as I've written down, if I have this right, the motion to allow interested internal candidates to apply for superintendent before March 22nd.
Amy, we don't have a process for
Well,
this.
and that's what that
So
was
I
the
don't
well,
understand.
the question is
This
whether or
your
not,
opportunity to vote on the motion.
Exactly.
That's the
This is-
motion, so we're going to vote on it.
so we're going to vote on whether or not we want to do it. So I'd like to call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that motion does not carry. Thank you. So would anyone, we can discuss kind of this concept further. Would anyone else like to offer another motion in terms of other ideas that we've kind of percolated here?
I don't know if it's a motion, but I think we certainly need to make sure that it's on our agenda, the discussion of internal candidates. However, my preference would be March 22nd, so it's all one happy event.
I did hear a discussion of perhaps having a motion to have a study session to talk about a process and information we might need before the 22nd about internal candidate applications. Did I hear anyone discussing that, or did I pick that up incorrectly?
If I can, I think given our protocol for new items, getting a board briefing on, if we have it, and if the superintendent or someone can, Jeff or Doug or whoever, on what does an internal search or an expedited search for an interim look like, also getting community involvement, because I think that's something at the level 4, I think that's something that we have. So if there was some, in a board briefing, we could see that and then be able to move forward. I think to educate ourselves on how that might look. And so that on the 22nd, when we're talking about the proposals, the RFP, if we also at that point want to have that discussion on what other processes would look like, because, and I'm sensitive to David's concern, don't spend money on a process that you're not going to use. And so if we're going to use a different process, so getting information through board briefing type, or we can do our own individual work on that, I think that is really more of our job rather than the the superintendent and the staff's job for us to think that through and to find that information. So I think that's what I'm hearing, that I think all of us are probably thinking about what that would look like and maybe drafting it or looking for someone else who had done that.
Okay. So, and the reason why I was asking is because we only have 2 weeks between now and then. And so if there was a desire to have a study session to talk about process or gather information, what have you, my ability to organize meetings when we're not sitting here is somewhat limited. And so that's why I wanted to have the discussion now if folks are interested or not. It just helps me from an organizational standpoint.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable waiting till the 22nd, and the WASDA has a lot of information on all external and internal that we can get, and we can all gather our own information, and we could share it around with each other too. So, I mean, I oftentimes email, Larry and say, can you please send this to the other board members? So I just feel, while I so appreciate that you're bringing up, is there a mechanism for this other process? I think that's awesome. That I don't know that we did clarify that we wanted to include that in that decision. But I think we did, because we said that day we don't have to hire a search firm. But I don't want to get where we're rushing and not being thoughtful, even though there's a timeline. So,
If I may, so if July 15th, or excuse me, March 15th is the next Tuesday, we are scheduled to have a site visit between 8 and 11, or 8:30 and 11:30. And so I think there are topics to discuss about the search in a whole host of ones. And so if there was a motion to have discussion of the search and search process, the goals, the objectives, I think there's a lot of information out there. And so if that's a request, there's a host of things that can be talked about on the 15th, that moves us more forward being able to talk about things. So I'm available on the 15th, if that's amenable, because I think Director Hogan brings up a very good point, and trying to get prepared and think through those kinds of things, that would be not reasonable to me to do that on the 15th rather than waiting the 22nd, which is very
After the tour of Skyview.
That's,
Okay.
that I'm looking at calendar and think, because I understand it's very hard to get the meeting, is that?
I mean, yeah. So to my point, it just seems like there's a lot of things that we need to have time to discuss and think about, and then come back together and have those conversations. So we can wait until the 22nd, and we'll have a bunch of more information, and where we can have a preliminary meeting to kind of just check on where people are at the time and what kind of questions people have, and kind of discuss that, and be willing to have that conversation as well.
Do you think that's productive, or is that not accomplishing where you're trying to get?
just make our meeting longer on the 22nd. I would rather have all the information.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be responsive to
Yeah,
the
okay.
question and the preference.
Knowing that's going to be a long meeting anyway, so, I mean, that's fine if we want to wait until the 22nd and tackle everything and go from there.
But I would like to get more information, so any information that, like, about the, any of the search processes, I mean, if we can stick that and work through things and we can even, can we do this, Larry? Distribute questions around review, right, that we might have.
Sure, I'm happy to receive questions. I don't know that I'll have necessarily all the answers for them, but I'm happy to receive them.
Distribute them to each other.
Oh, yeah, you can send them to me and I can be the collector and distributor.
How do you feel, Sandy?
That sounds lovely. I like the idea of perhaps maybe doing a little dividing and conquering of gathering information about internal searches. And then providing the information we get to Larry so that we distribute it to all of us. I think that's a very good idea, makes a lot of sense.
Do you want to assign or do we just want to?
Or, I think, again, 2 weeks from now, a lot of information may come up to folks that want to, definitely anything we hear, we feel we want everyone to hear it, to get it together. To leave it as open as possible.
And I also had a plan, and I'm planning on doing this next week, because I planned on calling 4 different school board members that I know from 4 different areas and posing the questions to them. So this is another thing, I had a list of questions. And that's another thing that I can put on that list. And all 4 of the school board